Thank you to Mr. Jason Chaffetz.
Thanks. That was a fun show. Always enjoy it. This is fun. Thank you.
And do I have bad breath?
No.
I'm just kidding.
It's
Tomorrow,
lovely.
we're back noon Eastern. But here is Harris.
Fox News alert, President Trump is promising strong action today on border laws. And he takes a shot at his critics and Democrats. Let's go outnumbered overtime. I'm Harris Faulkner. The White House is saying the president is planning to deploy the National Guard to the southern border with Mexico, a day after vowing to put boots on the ground there, so to speak, until his wall is built. The president tweeted, "Our border laws are very weak, while those of Mexico and Canada are very strong. Congress must change these Obama-era and other laws now. The Democrats stand in our way. They want people to pour into our country unchecked. Crime. We will be taking strong action today." Arizona Democrat Congressman Ruben Gallego, a frequent Trump critic, fired back, tweeting that the president, quote, "wants to use our troops to advance his extreme anti-immigrant agenda, while wasting time, resources, and money and depleting our military strength in areas of real danger. Congress must stop this misguided scheme." However, the president's plan to send the National Guard to the border has precedents. Former presidents George W. Bush and Barack Obama took similar action. Chief National Security Correspondent Jen Griffin is here now with more from the Pentagon. Jennifer?
Harris, it's not clear how the Pentagon would pay for such a deployment. The massive spending bill passed by Congress last month only provides $1.6 billion for President Trump's wall this year. The president wanted $25 billion, and it's not that easy to reappropriate defense funds. The president would have to go back to Congress to ask for that money. The Pentagon was caught off guard by President Trump's announcement yesterday that he planned to send the U.S. military to the border with Mexico. The top leadership of the National Guard also appeared to be caught by surprise. This morning, the Pentagon finally issued a non-committal statement, quote, "There are a number of ways the Department of Defense is already supporting the DHS border security mission. We are still in consultation with the White House about ways we can expand that support." The chief spokesman for the Pentagon issued examples of how the Pentagon already is helping with border security. The Navy has long been involved in a counter-narcotics mission at sea, seizing more than 250 tons of cocaine last year. The Army flies drones along the border, and the Army's Corps of Engineers is already helping DHS fortify existing sections of a border wall.
We're going to be doing things militarily. Until we can have a wall and proper security, we're going to be guarding our border with the military.
But a 100-year-old federal law passed after the Civil War to prevent federal troops from patrolling the South, known as Posse Comitatus, prevents the U.S. military from police action on U.S. soil. National Guard troops are not allowed to make arrests. They can only help Border Patrol with surveillance. President George W. Bush, as you mentioned, sent 6,000 National Guard troops to the border in 2006. President Obama sent 1,200 troops there in 2010. Previous presidents, Harris, have worked with state governors to deploy troops at the border. That may work in Texas and Arizona, where there are Republican governors. But in California, Democrat Jerry Brown has already said he would resist the order. Harris?
You know, it is interesting, just real quickly, Jennifer, when you look at the history of what other presidents have done and how this didn't become the kind of news story that this did. We will watch and see what will happen next. Great to see you. Let's bring in my very first guest, Alfonso Aguilar, president of the Latino Partnership for Conservative Principles and the former chief of the U.S. Office of Citizenship for President George W. Bush. Great to see you today, and a perfect person to talk to, as always, about these things.
Good seeing you, Harris.
Alfonso, tell me this, and I mentioned this with Jennifer. Why is this such a big deal with this particular president when others have done it, and we know we have a problem on our border?
Well, because Democrats love to criticize President Trump, specifically over immigration. They politicize the immigration issue. But I think this is a great idea. The president is right that the border is not under operational control, is not fully controlled. There are areas that are, frankly, totally out of control. The Rio Grande Valley, for example, in Texas, where most apprehensions actually happen. So I think in the absence of the ability to extend fencing, to build a wall system, I think the idea of using the military, not to do law enforcement, because as was reported, they cannot do policing activities, but to have them to do surveillance. You'll have more more eyes on the border so they can identify drug trafficking, human trafficking, and then call on the Border Patrol to detain and arrest those people. Let's remember that the bulk of the opioids coming into the country come from the southern border. I was surprised by Congressman Gallegos from Arizona, his comment about the president's idea. I mean, he comes from Arizona. There is a great deal of drug trafficking and human trafficking in the Tucson area, in the Tucson sector.
Yes.
So I'm surprised that he's not for this.
All right, so we have a special guest coming up following you, Alfonso, and you're setting it up perfectly. It's a member of that very Border Patrol in Tucson, Arizona. So I ask everybody to stand by for that. I want to ask now maybe some difficult questions. They make some people uncomfortable. Do we care how much Mexico or any other country south of our border is maybe offended by the way we are going to do immigration?
Well, you know, I don't look. I think we obviously they're our neighbor to our south.
Sure.
We have an important relationship, commercial relationship with them. So I think we should care, but at the same time, that shouldn't determine our policies at the border. The reality is, and everybody knows this, that Mexico's not doing enough to ensure the security of the border.
And why not? Is it politically beneficial for them? Why not?
Well, this is the truth, Harris, and I'll tell you the truth. There are criminal elements in Mexico with strong ties to politicians and people in the government that want to see a porous border so they can smuggle drugs across the southern border.
You're talking about corruption.
Exactly. That's it. And it's politically incorrect to say that, but it's time we say things and we're clear about what the problem is. I think this is a bilateral problem. Mexico has a border issue. There are people literally being killed, decapitated by drug cartels in northern Mexico. What is Mexico doing? I think that they should do more.
Yeah, it's interesting. What you want to do is some clear-eyedness and some plain speaking. So let's continue on with that. It isn't just Mexico. It's other parts south of us and Central and South America as well. Governments there that may have some question marks next to their names. And so let's get down to the nitty-gritty. Are they doing enough? And what more should they do to make their places more desirable to their own citizens?
Well, you know, that is a great question. And you look at questions, the so-called Northern Triangle countries, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala, and the violence there is just out of control. So I think they can do more in terms of security. We are working with them, so but they should also look at improving their economy. And I think by working with the United States, we have a trade agreement with Central America that we can strengthen. I think they can turn things around. But I must say, in those countries, there is a lot of corruption, a corruption that sadly allows for drug trafficking that generates this violence, and they have to deal with those challenges of corruption. And if they don't deal with that, if their governments, if their countries remain unstable in terms of security, then people are going to continue to try to come to the United States. And let me say, most of those people coming now are really not from Mexico. They're coming from Central America, from countries like Honduras and El Salvador.
Yeah, and you know what's so interesting? So you had this annual caravan. It's more of a pomp and circumstance that was coming through Mexico. Some of them did break off. Some 100 to 200 of them did break off, and there was some question about whether or not that group of that caravan was trying to come across our southern border. But with that caravan, Mexico did send some of those people back. I mean, they do have the policies to send those people back. Why don't we have the policies? Or do we, and we're not using them?
Well, again, that's another truth. I mean, in the United States, Mexico likes to present themselves as victims, but they're very tough on what they call them transmigrants. People coming from Central America through Mexico to get to the United States. They'll call them transmigrants, and they let many of them go through their territory to try to enter the United States. I don't think they're doing enough. They have tough laws. So why can't we have the same kind of laws? I mean, I think we have to look. I'm somebody who believes in immigration, and I believe in legal immigration. Certainly, we have to do something with the undocumented. Certainly, with the dreamers. But in terms of border security, I want to be very clear. We need to strengthen border security. Things have gotten slightly better, but much more has to be done. The president is absolutely right that we have to look at extended fencing, to a wall system, and many other assets. And as your report indicated, we've already had the military. The military right now is working.
That's an option that has been on the table before. Alfonso Aguilar, former head of citizenship under President George W. Bush, I always appreciate your time, and you set me up perfectly for that Border Patrol guest from Tucson, Arizona, so I hope you'll sit by and watch. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So my next guest says he does believe the president's proposal is very important and helpful. Art Del Cueto is a Border Patrol agent in Tucson, vice president of the National Border Patrol Council, the union for agents there for the Border Patrol. Great to have you today. Talk with me about the urgency, if you will, and the president dealing with the issues on our southern border.
It's a huge issue. We're very grateful to the president. First and foremost, we have somebody that's running the country that has put immigration at the forefront. It's something that it's been throughout his campaign, and it's a big deal. You know, I know here people are now talking about, talking about the military going down there. You know, it's a concept that was used before. There's no reason to attack our president. He's doing the right thing. We welcome the military to help us. They've helped us before. It would be easy to work with them. There's a lot of agents that are assigned to monitoring cameras or looking at sensors and different things like that, and they would be very helpful. They would be extremely helpful. So first and foremost, they'd be an extra pair of eyes, and that's what we need, an extra pair of eyes to see the drug cartels. It's not just people coming across, it's drugs that are entering our country. And we'd have an extra pair of eyes to allow the agents to enforce the laws.
All right, full disclosure. I have a home down by Nogales. I was married down there, so I know that. So you're kind of in our area down south of Tucson.
Right.
So I'm very familiar with the border issues down there. What you bring up in terms of how the military assists is something that isn't being talked about. We know in the cases of former Presidents Bush and Obama that the military, the National Guard, came in to assist in certain areas, those extra set of eyes. I've been down by the border when planes were illegally crossing. There's a whole lot of mess going on down there.
See, and that's the thing. I'm glad that you are very familiar with it, because the problem is a lot of individuals don't see how difficult it really is. And so the drugs that are coming in, they're not staying here. They're going to inner cities. By having the military there, by having those extra eyes, we put a dent where we need to put a dent, and that's in the profit of the cartels. You know, we're very happy we have a president that's actually bringing it to light and showing the necessity. But, you know, unfortunately, you know, we still have a lot of individuals within our own agency that are Obama holdovers that, you know, they may not have the same mentality that our president has. We have individuals still within our agency that were not fans of our president, and now they hold and continue to hold leadership positions within our agency, and that's one thing that's affecting us.
Agent Cueto, can you talk with me about the immediate need for a wall system and how it might work? I mean, I have an opportunity now to talk to somebody, and I know what part Nogales across from us kind of has and where it's porous.
Right. It's very important. You hear people argue the wall and say, well, people will still climb over it, dig underneath, go through it. That doesn't mean you give up. That doesn't mean you wave the white flag. What the wall does, being placed in strategic locations, is it gives our agents that opportunity to be able to respond. It's that extra delay for them so we can respond. I often talk about owning our own home. It's similar to owning your own home. You lock your doors at night. People still break in, but you still lock your doors at night. And one quote that I've been saying over and over is, the reason we do lock our doors at night is because we love the people inside, not because we hate the people outside. Illegal is not a race.
Agent Cueto, wow, some strong language there about this issue. We appreciate your expertise, sir, too. Thank you.
Thank you.
President Trump is telling the military to begin preparing to withdraw U.S. troops from Syria now that the Islamic State savages have been nearly defeated in that country. Is that move a good idea? A former Assistant Secretary of State is here to talk all about it. And Special Counsel Robert Mueller's team tells the president's attorneys that he is not a criminal target of his Russia investigation. No evidence for that. So what does that mean?
You generally don't tell people that you're not under investigation because you don't know what the next witness is going to say. This is such a weird hybrid of criminality and politics that I think he felt a special obligation to say, look, you're not the target of the investigation.
Fox News alert: President Trump is not a criminal target in the special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation. A source telling Fox News what Mueller's team told the president's attorneys while discussing a potential in-person interview was just that. Meanwhile, the Washington Post is reporting Mueller's team could release multiple reports on their findings, with the first one likely to focus on the issue of obstruction. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge now with the details. Catherine?
Well, thank you. Here is a source close to the matter confirmed to Fox News. The president's legal team was told in early March the president was not a criminal target of the special counsel investigation, but considered a subject or a witness. The source said special counsel Robert Mueller was at the meeting, and the conversation was in the context of a possible interview with the president. Some members of the legal team concluded an interview was not in the president's best interest because it would elevate his criminal jeopardy. This morning on Fox, law professor Alan Dershowitz said the leak may be strategic.
They're telling him he's not a target. He's merely a subject. That means he's a witness, and everybody has to testify as a witness. It's not legal pressure, but it's public pressure.
After providing other witnesses and records on a voluntary basis, the source said the president's legal team felt there was still no evidence to support criminal charges against the president, adding that the leak appeared to be an effort to pressure the legal team as well as the president.
This is such a weird hybrid of criminality and politics that I think he felt a special obligation to say, look, you're not the target of the investigation, but if the next witness says something different, all that can change.
So if you were his attorney, you would not say, you wouldn't have a sigh of relief?
Heavens no. I will have a sigh of relief when the investigation is over, and even then, maybe not.
At the end of last month, after lead attorney John Dowd resigned from the case, Dowd was against a special counsel interview. The president was pressed by reporters on his position.
Would you still like to testify to Special Counsel Robert Mueller, sir?
Thank you. Sure. I would like to.
You would like to?
I would like to.
And we'll likely learn a whole lot more at the briefing coming up just about an hour from now, Harris.
All right. Catherine, thank you very much.
You're
Joining
welcome.
me now with more on this, Fox News politics editor Chris Steyerwalt. So, Chris, where are we just in terms of moving forward at this point? I mean, is this a signal, since the president is not legally a criminal target, that things are coming closer to an end, or we don't know?
Well, it depends on what the president wants to do, what the president decides to do. This is, in every way, Mueller has indicated in all possible public ways that he can, while still keeping propriety of his office, is he's ready to wrap. He wants to wrap. He wants to finish his reports. He wants to finish his work. He wants to move on. But he can't do it until he talks to Trump. And so Trump's legal team, which has gone through a lot of changes over the past weeks and months, it seems to be at odds, or maybe the president's at odds. We don't know about the question of whether he's going to sit down and talk to Mueller. But Mueller can't finish until he talks to Trump.
All right. So here's some facts that we do know. And it's interesting that you bring up the president's legal team, because we know from John Dowd's own words that perhaps they were in different camps on whether or not the president should sit down and actually talk with Robert Mueller. The two attorneys left behind, Jay Sekulow and Ty Cobb, reportedly are very much in the camp with the president. The one who thought it was maybe not a good idea, gone. The ones who think it might be, still with him.
I think one of the important things for everybody to remember in this case is that the Justice Department regulations, that everything in tradition and all of these other things say that no way is the president going to be charged with a crime, period. The penalty for presidents is political. It's not in court. Nobody is going to arrest the president. That's not what Robert Mueller is talking about doing here, and never was. I think that for his legal team, talking about what's the exposure here, the exposure for the president is political. The exposure for the president is with Congress. That's where the danger is. It's not a criminal danger. I would say this. The president says he's clean. He says that he has not done wrong, that there is no collusion, that he hasn't done anything wrong. And there are no indications so far from Mueller that Mueller is trying to rig the game or that he is doing something wicked or nefarious. So, in fact, if the president says he's clean, all the evidence about Mueller says that Mueller is being forthright in his investigation. If those two things are true, why wouldn't the president sit down with him, and why wouldn't he bring this to a conclusion so that his administration can get on with focusing the work of the people?
Yeah, so all of that exists unless and until the president sits down and maybe makes a mistake in the way he puts something. And we know that Mueller has gone after people if he even sniffs impropriety in terms of truth-telling. And sometimes...
Well, you can't lie to him.
Right. But
that is for
now,
sure.
It's interesting that you say that, because when you talk about Andrew McCabe, who just exited the FBI, well, he didn't lie those 4 times to the feds. He was deceptive. Let's get on the same page about what lying is. And let's use that as also an example. But my point is, if there's really no criminal finding here, and there's still questions about whether Mueller could even charge a sitting president, why are we in the middle of this investigation?
Because the president has not yet sat down and talked to Mueller. Until the president talks to Mueller, Mueller can't rap. And that's the catch-22 for the president and his legal team is there are many who do not want, who think that the president will make a mistake or say something untrue.
Do you think that?
I have no idea. I have no idea what the president was thinking or doing in 2015 or 2016. But I do know that for those people who are concerned about what the president might do or has done or say, that has to be balanced out with the other consideration that Mueller cannot reasonably or respond. Let's say Mueller was going to come back with a clean bill of health for the president. Okay. Yeah, there were some problems with these underlings, but Mueller's going to come back and say, hypothetically, he's clean. He didn't do anything wrong. He can't ever get there, and no one would accept that finding if he did it without interviewing the president. He has to finish.
And Chris, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but there's a reason why I ask you that. I mean, we all have been reporting, and we see what we see. The president has sat down across from state leaders, and I made this point in Outnumbered a few minutes ago, heads of state, CEOs, chair people. I mean, he is somebody who is capable, obviously, of sitting down and having a conversation. And from reports, the scope would be more like 2 hours, not the 9 or so that Corey Lewandowski and others have sat down with investigators about. Why wouldn't the president just do it and get it over with? Polling shows politically it's expedient for him as well.
And, in fact, the longer he doesn't, the more this becomes a focus, and the longer he refuses to be interviewed, the guiltier it looks. And that narrative, if you want to defeat that narrative, then you got to get out there. You got to do the thing. You got to take your medicine and move on, because otherwise we're going to be stuck in this. And, you know, even if Mueller wanted to bring it to a conclusion today, he can't really until he can tell Congress, until he can tell the Justice Department, I finished, I talked to everybody, and here's what I found.
Is that fair to say that somebody looks guilty because they're trying to figure out whether or not they want to sit down with you and negotiate the terms of that? Is that really fair? Very
often, innocent people end up doing things that look guilty. For example, when Trump fired Robert Mueller, the way that he fired him,
you mean James
and mentioning Russia in the letter, it wasn't that it made him guilty necessarily. It was like, why did you do that and say it in the way that he did? It creates a narrative. It reinforces a narrative from your detractors. So if you're innocent, act innocent. As Trey Gowdy said before, if you're innocent, act like it.
All right. Chris Steyerwalt, the Steyer is on fire. Thank you very much. Good to see you.
You bet.
The White House is saying the military mission to eradicate the Islamic State savages, my words, not theirs, is coming to a rapid end as President Trump tells military leaders to get ready to withdraw troops from Syria. Is it time for our troops to come home from there, or is there risk in ISIS resurging? Plus, an update on that shooting at the YouTube headquarters in San Bruno, California. What we now know about the woman police say opened fire before taking her own life. Stay close. Let's take a look at what some of this day is all about. It is remembering the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was assassinated on this day in 1968, around 6 p.m. in Memphis, Tennessee. He was at the Lorraine Hotel, of course, now a site that is the Civil Rights Museum. People gathering there today to admire his legacy and to remember what it means to have dreams come true in America, from the man who said he had one for all of us and united so many. It's been 50 years since that assassination, and today performers and speakers and others who are remembering him have gathered there at the site. You know, the doctor had talked about wanting to bring people together, and that's exactly what we're seeing on this day, the Reverend. And so we just wanted to bring you a little of what's happening now. We do have another shot sometimes, and they will pull out, and you will see how large that crowd is and all the people who've come to remember in Memphis. But we wanted to take you there live and just remind you the importance of this day. We'll move on. Fox News alert. The White House says the U.S. military mission in Syria is coming to an end. President Trump has told the military to begin preparing to withdraw U.S. troops. But so far, there is no timetable. And he has said before he wouldn't share one about anything military. According to the Washington Post, there are about 2,000 American soldiers in the nation advising and assisting local forces in the fight against ISIS inside Syria. The White House press secretary released a statement that said, in part, the military mission to eradicate ISIS in Syria is coming to a rapid end, with ISIS being almost completely destroyed. We expect countries in the region and beyond, plus the United Nations, to work toward peace and ensure that ISIS never reemerges, end quote. But Lieutenant Colonel Michael Waltz shared his concerns earlier on Fox. Watch.
When the United States leaves a vacuum, it's filled with bad actors. And in this case, it's going to be Iran, Russia, and the Assad regime. And they are going to essentially crush the folks that we've been working with on the ground, have no uncertain terms that that's what's going to happen. And we are going to essentially have the region explode again.
Robert Charles is former Assistant Secretary of State to Colin Powell, a former White House staffer to Presidents Bush and Reagan, and a former Navy intelligence officer. So you can look spherically at this situation from leadership to military. Great to have you. Thanks for being here today.
Thank you.
Is this a good idea to pull our American troops in most part out of Syria?
No, but I think what the president was really saying is that he's looking toward a gradual de-escalation. He didn't use that word, but I think that's what he's talking about. We do have about 2,000 troops there. They're in this is all public information. They're in 8 locations. Of those, really the biggest 2 are Raqqa and Hasaka. And what we're doing is support mission activity. I worked a little bit after the fact in Iraq and Afghanistan, and what your last guest said is true. You don't want to have a precipitous withdrawal. But right now, de-escalation is really the word of the moment. Right now, today, in Ankara, you have Russia, Turkey, and Iran sitting down trying to create a constitution that Assad would live by in some form and de-escalate the environment there. We have about, I'd say, 15 allies over there right now, and we're looking to basically figure out a way to stabilize a highly unsettled environment. Your last guest was also right. There are a lot of competing geopolitical factors on the ground there. The Kurds worked with us. We don't want to abandon them. We have strong interest in trying to create a gradually more stable environment, not allow what happened in 2009 when Obama came in after the status of forces agreement in Iraq. He tried to rewrite everything, and we got instability, so we don't want that. But a gradual de-escalation is probably sensible policy.
All right, so I'm glad you got to how this would be different than what President Obama did in Iraq, because that led to a resurgence of not just ISIS, but all of the tribal difficulties that had already existed in that country in Iraq were exploited by the fact that you had these forces on the ground that had their own agenda called the ISIS group. So I want to move forward now in terms of a timetable. This president went on the campaign trail, got a lot of applause from people who said, when he said, I'm not going to give a date certain on military things that I do. So we won't get that, or will we?
Well, I mean, look, the battlefield is always different from the boardroom and the planning stages, and I think that we all know that you can't set a timetable that is not connected to reality. What we did, what the president really led with General Mattis and others in the field was the idea that we would destroy ISIS. We have effectively done that. We're at the 95% point. But you don't play a baseball game brilliantly for 8 innings and then put it in the books. You have to play the 9th inning, and you have to finish it. And that's where we are right now today. We have to be able to wrap up operations against ISIS. We have to find a degree of not necessarily agreement, but a degree of common purpose understanding about what the rules of the game will be. Russia will probably have 2 permanent bases in there. We'll probably have a modest presence that's less muscular and more smart. We will also, Turkey has their interests.
What does that mean, less muscular and more? Are you saying that we won't have a base there?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you have to.
When you talk about other countries, particularly Russia having a base there, shouldn't we also be there in some regard? I'm just asking.
No, your point is well taken. We have to be able to be responsive and proactive and have a firm line. We have to be engaged is what it boils down to. And right now, we have a lot of allies. I think what we're trying to do is create a presence there that is modest, effective, responds to Russia, Iran, and Turkey, but isn't over the top and doesn't further endanger American troops. If we can bring them home, we'll do it.
Well, and the president also talked about cutting costs in this measure, too, because it's expensive to stay the way we are if it's not necessary. Real quickly, you said 95% ISIS destroyed. They metastasize very quickly, and we're in 14 countries. Does that include every place else? Just real quick.
No, I think they are a threat in Afghanistan and other places around the world, including the Far East. But I think we've made tremendous progress against them, and they're effectively being dismantled to the point of non-existence.
All right. Robert Charles, former Assistant Secretary of State, thank you very much for your time and your expertise, sir.
Thank you.
A short time ago, police provided an update. We showed you that a little bit live on Outnumbered. It was about yesterday's shooting at YouTube's headquarters in San Bruno, California, amid growing questions about the woman who attacked there. The latest on what police now say.
It is believed that the suspect was upset with policies and practices of YouTube. This appears to be the motive of for this incident.
Police in California have provided some chilling new details today on what may have led a woman who went on a shooting rampage yesterday at YouTube's headquarters to do so. 3 people were shot before the attacker turned the gun on herself, police tell us. Claudia Cowan is live in San Bruno, California with the latest. Claudia?
Good afternoon, Harris. YouTube headquarters remains closed while crime scene investigators continue their work as we learn more about the shooter's grudge against the company and that after an encounter yesterday morning with local police, she took time out to practice firing her gun.
Investigators also learned that the suspect went to a local gun range yesterday morning prior to visiting YouTube.
Police say 39-year-old Nasim Agdam gained access to the sprawling tech campus through a parking garage and used a legally obtained semi-automatic handgun to wound 3 employees before killing herself. Her family down south in San Diego reported her missing on Monday, and according to her brother, she was very angry at YouTube, saying she felt the company was discriminating against her. Agdam was very active on social media and had several channels on YouTube. She described herself as an artist and a vegan activist and had recently accused YouTube of filtering her videos and shortchanging her on revenue. Police in Mountain View, some 430 miles from San Diego,